That's it in the last sector.
Yeah. That's 6-7. The rest was strong, was super strong. And that's from Piastri in P3.
Great job though, guys.
Yeah, it was a good effort. Thank you. Good box.
What does it mean that Hamilton, after months of frustration, say on radio, is a fantastic result in the SF25? Is Ferrari back, or is it just a technical mirage? During free training, in particular the second session, Hamilton could barely mark the 10th time. It was not simply a bad result. It was a reflection of a lack of deep connection between pilot and machine. While Lando Norris flew with his McLaren and marked the guideline in average load conditions, Hamilton was almost a second distance. It wasn't just a rhythm issue. It was an uncomfortable statement. Ferrari had not yet resolved the structural defects of his car, and that was taking an invoice to the 7-time world champion. That frustration was recorded in a radio transmission that summarizes the pilot's emotional state. "For some reason, I have no rhythm, friend." Those words, pronounced with a mixture of confusion and impotence, have a weight that goes far beyond performance. They are the cry of someone accustomed to fighting at the top, now forced to fight against the invisible limits of a car still in the redemption. Hamilton's radio, beyond its brevity, reflects accumulated discomfort, the type of tension that is generated when a pilot feels that the car is failing in the key moments. But that same night, in the offices of the Ferrari paddock, a small revolution was cooked. Maranello had decided to bring a massive update to Red Bull Ring, a ground modification that had not been seen in any other race of the season until that moment. It was not a cosmetic improvement, but a total redesign. It included the reconfiguration of the ground fences, a new profile for the wing of the edge, and a diffuser reviewed with greater volume and efficiency. This intervention had a precise mission: unlock the capacity of the SF25 to operate at lower heights of suspension without compromising the integrity of the flat background. A technical detail that sounds smaller, but is fundamental in a modern Formula One car, where a few millimeters define whether the car is competitive or uncontrollable. On Friday, Hamilton did not have it. But on Saturday morning, in preparations for classification, he began to feel something different. The car sensors reported greater lateral stability. The aerodynamic rebound had been reduced. And in the fast return simulations, the SF25 began to align the reference times. The most important thing, Hamilton recovered sensations. Those small signals improved traction at the exit of curve 3, stability in the support of curve 6. The precision in the braking downhill were enough to convince him that something big could happen that afternoon. The transformation between Friday and Saturday was not a miracle. It was a clear sample of how much a car can change with the right piece at the right time. Ferrari had executed well, and Lewis had taken advantage of it. But all this was just the prelude to the moment that would come by radio. Before that message, before relief, there was a silent storm of doubts, technical effort, and perseverance. Austria, until that moment, was still a hostile territory for Hamilton. But that Saturday began to change. When Lewis Hamilton crossed the finish line after his last classification turn at Red Bull Ring, there was a sense of change in the air. For the first time throughout the season, the British was located in a starting position that could be considered truly competitive. 4th position, 2nd row, ahead of one of the Red Bull. Ahead even of his own teammate. It was a result that at first glance might seem simply correct, but in reality, it meant much more. Because it wasn't just a matter of numbers. It was a strategic, emotional, and symbolic statement. The posterior radio was concise but revealing. It is a fantastic result. The team worked really hard in the factory to bring us a new floor this weekend. Considering that yesterday we were between 6 and 9 tenths behind, being much closer and in the second row, it is really fantastic. The tone of voice was not that of excessive euphoria, but that of a satisfaction contained, loaded with meaning. For those who know Hamilton, this type of communication is key. His words, carefully selected, not only congratulate the team. They are a direct validation that the technical sacrifice has begun to bear tangible fruits. And also, without saying it directly, a recognition that your own personal delivery adapts, your learning, your persistence has finally been rewarded. This radio message was much more than an emotional reaction. It was a political signal within the Ferrari ecosystem. Hamilton is not any pilot within the structure. It is a weight figure, and its statements influence both the garage and the Maranello offices. By highlighting the factory effort, the British was reinforcing the importance of technical investment. I was sending a message to the managers. This is what happens when we do well. Let's continue this way. His phrase was not a simple thanks. There is also an important psychological component. The Lewis Hamilton who speaks on the radio in Spielberg is not the same as we hear in Bahrain or Melbourne. Those radios were full of frustration, discomfort, unanswered questions. Here, however, there is clarity, trust, and above all, a sense of belonging. Hamilton begins to feel part of the Ferrari project not only as an employee but as a leader. That emotional connection is vital, because when a pilot like him feels integrated and backed, his performance can rise exponentially. From a competitive point of view, the statement also has a purpose. Hamilton is marking territory. By overcoming Leclerc in classification, it is demonstrating that even with little adaptation time, it can be faster. But he doesn't say it directly. Instead, he frames it in a team speech in a context of collective advance. That is one of its greatest skills, communicating domain without generating internal friction. A political art within the Formula One boxes. In addition, this radio represents a narrative break. During the first months of the season, Ferrari had been the protagonist for his mistakes, for his lack of technical evolution, due to strategic decisions that left doubts. But this time the story changes. Hamilton not only has something positive to say, but he says it clearly, and that transforms Ferrari's public perception. It is no longer a team that survives, to become one that starts building. Lewis Hamilton's radio message at the end of the Austrian Grand Prix classification may seem, at first glance, an instant of personal celebration. But if it is analyzed with greater depth, it becomes a key indicator of what could be to come for Ferrari and for the 2025 championship as a whole. It is a dividing line in the narrative of the season. A turning point that, well managed, can mark the beginning of a structural transformation within the Italian team, with consequences that go beyond a single race. First, we must understand that this classification not only impacts sports, but also on the internal confidence of the team. Ferrari came from a start of the season full of doubts. An unstable car, inconsistent results, and a growing media pressure to justify the arrival of Hamilton. The problems with the SF25 were technicians but also symbolic. It was a car that even Austria seemed to refuse to be competitive when it was most needed. But the update introduced and validated by this result suggests that Ferrari is beginning to correctly read the needs of the car, something that he had not achieved for years. This change also allows to project a more stable evolution scenario. If the solutions applied to the car floor have allowed to unlock a greater configuration margin, then we can expect the SF25 to become more versatile and manageable in circuits of different characteristics. It ceases to be a temperamental car to become a more predictable tool. And that is vital for the seasonal strategy, because it allows planning based on more stable data and not depending on circumstantial miracles. On the competitive plane, Hamilton's fourth position has another important reading. The classification rhythm begins to align with those of the upper part of the grille. It is no longer just a struggle to enter Q3, but a real possibility of disputing podiums and, under certain conditions, even victories. This puts direct pressure on teams such as Red Bull and McLaren, which until now had been shown as the only real contenders. If Ferrari can consolidate this step forward in the next calendar quotes, especially in paths such as Silverstone or Hungaroring, we could be facing a new main actor in the fight for the construction championship. But there are also internal political implications. The figure of Hamilton gains ground within the structure of the equipment. This result gives you technical legitimacy. He is not just a champion of the past trying to adapt. He is an emotional and strategic engineer who is actively contributing to improving the car. This can alter the balance of power within Ferrari, where Charles Leclerc has so far been the strong man. If Lewis continues to be more competitive, a silent tension will inevitably be generated that will require delicate management by Frederic Vasseur. And that tension, well channeled, can be productive. Two elite pilots by mutually pushing towards the limit, forcing the team to evolve faster. At the media level, this result and that radio also modify the perception of the project. The narrative that previously talked about a lost or declined Hamilton begins to transform into another much more powerful. That of the return of a giant, now dressed in red, willing to write a new chapter of glory. Fans perceive it. The rivals feel it. And the press begins to ask questions that were not on the table before. Can Ferrari aspire to the title in 2025? Can Hamilton win again with a different third team? Finally, there is a detail that should not go unnoticed. The way this result can influence the dynamics of the paddock. When a team like Ferrari shows signs of resurgence, other shields react. Technical development is accelerated. Update strategies are modified. There may even be impacts on the pilot market and the organizational structure of the equipment. In Formula One, success does not occur in a vacuum. Everything is interconnected. And when a giant like Ferrari begins to move, the rest feels vibration. The analysis of the classification of Austria and especially of Lewis Hamilton's radio after that result makes it clear that we are facing a key point within the narrative of the 2025 season. But if you really want to squeeze the entire potential of this story not only as content for video, but as a piece of deep understanding of the championship, it is essential to expand the development of the first block. Deepen the previous path to Austria would not only enrich the viewer's understanding, but would cement even more the emotional and technical structure of this script. Why insist on extending that first act? Because that is where the true dramatic load is located. Showing how Hamilton dealt with an unpredictable car in the first races, how Ferrari tried unsuccessfully to find an operational base configuration, and how factory work was refining with pain and patience every part of the SF25, converts the classification of Austria into much more than a good return. It transforms it into the climax of a silent tension that had been brewing from Bahrain, even from the pre-season.